Test. All right. All right. Thank you guys for showing up on the first Medical Cannabis Day at the Capitol. We're really appreciative and we have so much love for the plant. We want to share the information and education with everyone. So we have a great lineup of speakers. And to start off our Medical Cannabis Day, we have an opening message from Dr. Otto. And I'll read a short bio. Dr. Otto is a certified cannabinoid medicine specialist, a certifying provider of Hawaii's Medical Cannabis program. He was the physician member on the 2014 Hawaii Dispensary Task Force and has been working with legislative since 2011 to improve the medical program and protect patients' rights. He was definitely helpful and responsible for this day. He wrote a lot of letters to a lot of the mayors and stuff to get this day noticed, and has had flags been brought down and recognized for this day. So thank you, Dr. Otto, and we'll play his message.
Hello, everybody. Dr. Clifton Otto here, wishing you a very happy Medical Cannabis Day 2024. Today is a very important day because it marks the 24th anniversary of the day that Governor Cayetano signed our Medical Use of Cannabis Act into law, thereby exercising the state's constitutional authority over the practice of medicine within the state. The theme of this year's logo is Respect the Medicine, which I believe includes two important steps. The first step is recognizing that there is no such thing as recreational use. I believe that people who say that they're using cannabis recreationally are really self-treating for things like anxiety, depression, and insomnia. And I would also argue that there is medical utility in euphoria. So basically I'm saying there is medical use and there's abuse. And I would include religious and spiritual use within the medical use category. If we can agree that there is really only medical use, then the next step follows very naturally, which is to protect the rights of our medical cannabis patients, which can be accomplished through various things such as education and advocacy. There are some local groups that are doing a great job with the education piece. I would just warn that we should not use education on the endocannabinoid system as a way to promote recreational legalization. This education needs to focus on the needs of our patients. And we're in desperate need of advocacy right now, especially with the situation where over 2,600 of our medical cannabis patients are at risk of losing their primary caregiver at the end of this year, which means losing access to their medical cannabis. Another way to protect patient rights is to understand the law, which means reading the law, not going off of what you hear in the news or what you hear from other people. And I can tell you that understanding the law gets easier the more you read it. Understanding the law also makes it easier to follow the law, which is very important for patients right now. Thinking that certain laws are unjust and not worth following takes us down a very dangerous path of completely disregarding the rule of law altogether and encouraging more criminal activity. Understanding the law also opens the door to changing the law. And perhaps one thing that could be added is a medical cannabis patient bill of rights to specifically protect certain rights such as uninterrupted access to medical cannabis, personal cultivation in ways that actually address the needs of patients, freedom from discrimination at both the state and federal level, and medical decision-making within the doctor-patient relationship that respects the needs of the patient and the authority of the certifying provider to decide what constitutes a qualifying condition. For those who are more fiscally minded, I'd like to point out data from the CDC, which shows that about 20% of adults in the US are currently suffering from chronic pain. If we extrapolate that to Hawaii's population, that means there are over 220,000 potential medical cannabis patients for pain alone. If half of those patients registered with the program, I think a lot of people would be very happy. But the answer for medical cannabis is not recreational legalization. The answer is respecting the medicine, which means making sure that our patients will not be discriminated against at the state or federal level for participating in our program. I think right now it's very important for all of those involved to come together and reach a consensus on these important issues so that there can be a unified force moving forward. And with that, I would like to wish you a very safe and productive Medical Cannabis Day. Aloha.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Otto, for that wonderful message. Next up, we have Brent. You're next. Brent Norris of Hawaii Patients Union. He's going to provide a historical perspective of Medical Cannabis Day and looking towards the future. Brent Norris is a designer that enjoys bringing people together to improve lives and build the new. This is his first cannabis presentation. Today, Brent will provide a brief history on how Medical Cannabis Day kind of got started, what's included in Medical Cannabis Day, and what we have to look forward to. And this is from a patient perspective, caregiver perspective, his most important role yet. Thank you, Brent.
Thank you, Kai. I appreciate that. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Really makes the trip worth it. Like I said, this is my first presentation on cannabis. For the last 10 years, I've been getting real experts in front of people, and that's usually medical professionals. Once in a while, we get an attorney that will talk, but it's mostly folks in the medical field that are compassionate. These are people that deal with patients, and they have an innate understanding of what it's like to work with a patient. When we step outside of that medical doctor or nurse caregiver role into something else, when we step into industry, for example, we start to lose sight of what it's like to have a patient program. Next slide. So we're going to give you a real quick introduction to what we've been doing with Medical Cannabis Day. 2019 was our first year, and it was sort of an add-on event. This was a really great time to be involved in organizing events because the dispensaries we only had one on our island that was open. They'd only been open for 5 months, and they weren't yet trying to take market share from patient grow sites yet. So everyone got along. All the dispensaries were at that Medical Cannabis Day. Senator Russell Ruderman, who introduced, I think, 8 bills for 8 years straight, legalization bills. That never passed. Did our opening keynote. We had music, we had food, everything was really nice, and it was held at rented the venue from a federal agency, which I thought was kind of cool, and so did they. That was National Oceanographic and AA. NOAA is what we would call it, and it was sort of a 3-day event. So that was Friday night and Saturday night was a trade show. We had panel discussions and all that sort of stuff at the Civic Center. This was the first year that cannabis was mentioned on the radio, at least on our island. So we did radio ads, and radio station said, we got it approved, which I was like, what do you mean got it approved? And then they're like, well, you use the word cannabis, and check. So that was an important moment as well, and there's just a lot of good vibes going along. And then we did it again on June 14th. June 14th doesn't always fall on a Friday or a Saturday, right? We're real lucky when it does because more people can come out and attend. And so for the 2020, this is when we went virtual. Things started getting weird around the world with COVID, and I think it just made a lot more sense to scale down as these things were happening. And so we did, and it turned out virtual was a really great way to hold these events because people that normally couldn't attend could then attend. So at that time we had people in Queens actually watching the event from a hospital bed, which is, you know, they just felt like they were part of what everyone else was doing, and it was really helpful for their healing journey. So that was a good event. We had legislative panel. We had, let me see what else we had. Oh yeah, this was also it was the prior year when Governor Ige vetoed Bill 290. Does anyone remember that? That was when we asked if it would be okay if we took our medicine to another island, if we wanted to go visit a family member or just have the freedom of travel. And so we got a bill passed, and then the governor vetoed the bill, saying it would give the wrong impression of our rights. Basically, it said the purpose of this bill is to authorize qualifying patients or qualifying out-of-state patients to transport medical cannabis between islands for their personal medical use. Sounds like a good idea. If it's opioids or fentanyl, we're allowed to do that. But this bill is objectionable because of the large number of residents and their visitors who may be misled to their detriment by the purported authorization in this bill of the inter-island transportation of medical cannabis for personal medical use. And it goes on a little bit to really sort of underscore 4 years later why we do these events. Because if we don't, no one else is looking back 4 years and explaining where we were. And I think it's really helpful to have that awareness so that we know where we want to go. And we could go to 2021. Another virtual event, another benefit of having virtual events is we could get Dr. Bonnie Goldstein, a pediatrician, research scientist, working with, I'm sure, thousands of children by now. And she's a personal hero of mine. And so when you do virtual events, you can get anyone from anywhere in the world. The one that we missed was Dr. Machulam. Unfortunately, he passed before we could get him on. One of the interesting things, I think, about the virtual events as well is you can hear a lot of ideas at once, right? When we have a panel discussion, the growers panels, for example, we learn a lot about growing. In our legislative panels, what we've learned a lot about is no one's on the same page. And you know, one of the questions we like to ask of legislators that want to legalize cannabis is, what does that mean? And so that question has never been answered in a cohesive way. Everyone seems to have their own answer of what legalization means. But when we're faced with criminal charges, it's real important that we know exactly what it means. It needs to be really well defined. So we hope to be able to do that. And this year, in 2022, it was quite a year. This is also the year that we started to organize on other islands. And so that was really important to our success as well, because it allowed more people to participate. So then we could go virtual, but we could go virtual from multiple islands. And I think it was 2023 that we did on 4 islands. And so we set up shop on Kauai and Oahu and Maui. And that was really great. We also had a legislative panel, Senator Joy Sanbuena Matura, who's, I'm a constituent, cannabis nurse Wendy Gibson, Mark Barnett from the Maine Cannabis Alliance. You guys familiar with any of Maine's laws? They're pretty solid. And then Al Byrne, For Country and Cannabis. He's the author of the book For Country and Cannabis. He's one of the OGs from way back in the day, as was Alice O'Leary, who keynoted one of our virtual presentations. And Alice O'Leary is known as the first lady of medical cannabis. It was her husband, Robert, that got the first cannabis license. So that was a really great event. May Fuima Ono Po was also there, and I remember being excited about this one because the very next day I went down to the local Palace Theater and rented out the theater. And I got some help from a sponsor to go rent that theater out, and I went straight down. And then things kind of changed. So here we are, 2024. I was in the middle of a harvest in August, and I was just kind of finishing up, and I got a wake up in the morning, real early in the morning. Shot up out of bed, and as I shot up out of bed, I realized, wow, somebody's calling my name. Now, I don't even have a driveway. I have a trail to my treehouse, right? So for someone to be calling my name and I can hear them, it's like, whoa, you're way too close. What are you doing while I'm in bed, man, But all simultaneously, I'm like, wow, that's my mom. Like, that's not that unusual. But I called her anyway, and I thought, I should see if anything is up. And she was on her way to the hospital, so she had some like real intense pain, in her leg and upper leg, and so she was going to the hospital. I'm like, wow, okay. So hopped on a plane, went out, and her renal carcinoma had come back. So I'm going to tell a little bit about this story. You're probably going to remember it. And it can be, if you are a caregiver, if you've lost someone to cancer, this may not be a great story for you to go through. So I just want to point that out before I do it. This was my mom's second diagnosis with renal carcinoma, so we kind of knew what was coming. We had all the difficult conversations, and I thought, well, okay, I'm going to be there. And so I went to North Georgia. Anyone been to North Georgia before? It's a Bible Belt. Everyone goes to church, and everyone has sort of these prohibitionist church beliefs in the area, including her medical professionals that were helping her out for 30 years, telling her everything was fine the whole 30 years. I remember the doctor appointments when I would go visit. And then one time, it's not fine anymore. You might want to change your diet now. And so what ended up happening is we checked her into the hospital. We had some intense pain going on, and the renal carcinoma, what happens when it goes through your kidney, your renal, is that cancer can just kind of go in there and go anywhere else. And so that's what it did. It had shot down into her pelvis and shot up her arm, and so, it wasn't looking good at all. My job quickly became that of primary caregiver, which I had not been before. Just had an agreement to take care of my mom, that was all. And so it was time to do that. And then that's when the real battle began. So how many people have worked with hospice? Okay. And how many people have been a caregiver to a loved one? Fantastic. So I put hospice off. I had to separate all of my mom's friends' requests. Like, oh, you should call hospice, you should call hospice. And in my mind, I'm like, well, we're about to go through a RSO regimen, and I don't think I'm going to call hospice right now. And so that's a difficult decision. There's a chain of difficult decisions you go through. But in North Georgia, the difficult decision that I had to go through was, where am I going to get this regimen of RSO? Right? The pharmacies didn't have it yet. They're going to carry cannabis. So you got to have a real friend that's willing to make large quantities. And I happen to have a friend that can help me out, did help me out and made sure that we could run through this full regimen. If you haven't done a regimen of RSO, in the last week you're up over 1 gram per day. You could compare that to 1,000 gummies per day, but that's not really true because the gummies are lower THC than the RSO, right? So it's a lot of medicine. And when someone's on a lot of medicine, nurses notice, friends notice, and your patient is sleeping a lot, and then it doesn't work anymore, right? Because bone cancer, as it had turned into, is just excruciating. And have you dealt with bone cancer? Bone cancer is the type that nothing really works at all, except morphine. So, gotta find some morphine, right? So her doctor did give me some morphine. I was able to administer morphine for about 2 weeks, and then he cut us off and put us into a situation of forced hospice care. Now, hospice care, they go to church too. And they're not really interested in seeing any RSO laying around or anything like that. So now you're inviting people into your home that could potentially put you in jail for delivering this medicine that you can't even obtain, right? It's the other problem is getting a hold of it. But if you do get a hold of it and you can hide it from the medical professionals that come in from hospice, then you're doing really, really well. That includes, you may have to do things like use the morphine, right? But just go put it out in the dirt, right? Instead of in the mouth for your patient, because you want to make sure that you're following the doses that's recommended by the doctor, or it throws flags up. Like, why do you have so much morphine a week later? And so, you know, these are things that you might have to do. And the other thing that I think is really important to know is to not take a lot of advice in a situation like that. This is where you've probably planned your whole life to be ready for this moment. Most people are not. Most people turn everything over to hospice. But with the RSO regimen, I was able to give my mom 3 more coherent weeks with minimum morphine. Coherent weeks means that family has an opportunity to travel and say hi, right? 3 more weeks makes this huge difference in a patient's life when they can just interact normally for a little longer. Because when those few 2-3 weeks, 1 week is up, then it's morphine all the time, right? And then the morphine addiction sets in, and you're basically giving your patient a drug that they're addicted to on the it comes down to 3 hours, large doses of morphine. And so working through all of that, what I'm trying to say here is I want everyone to realize that not all patients are the same. And sometimes the law doesn't really work very well with medicine. We see this with the opioid crisis, right? That's an example of the law not really working, and hundreds of thousands of people are dying. But in the case of medical cannabis, and on Medical Cannabis Day, I would just like to remind us all that we have a long way to go to convince people to help us, to allow us to be caregivers, not to drop the caregiver program, but to provide a way so that some of our kupuna can access the medicine. Our children need to be able to access the medicine. And sometimes our children, we can't necessarily bring children up in front of everyone because not all of these children talk. When you have a non-vocal patient, it's not going very well. And that's what actually got me started with cannabis was the first time I saw a child, 18-year-old child, with a grand mal seizure, stop their seizure with just coconut oil mix that I made, stop the seizure in 30 seconds. So that's another type of a patient that is not going to recover, but that we care for, and it becomes our life. This particular patient had her mom was a Marine veteran and a cannabis refugee. So the unintended consequence that she experienced was when she heard that Hawaii was coming out with our dispensary program. Anyone remember how long it took to get our first dispensary after the program?
2 years.
Was it 2 years? And so what happened was there was a group of parents with kids with autism, this is an autism organization, moved to Hawaii when they heard that we were getting dispensaries. They get here, they have no health care, they're relying on having the cannabis when they get here, and then it takes 2 years for them to get their child's medicine. But interestingly enough, if you have a child going through this and you don't have the money, then you're on programs to help you afford medicine, right? And the government will put you on a program. They're happy to get you to use the medicine that is approved, right? They're not necessarily going to buy any cannabis, but that's okay because you don't use it all the time anyway. You only use that type of medicine, prescription pharmaceuticals, when you absolutely need them and you can't get cannabis. But you see them harming the child at the same time. These are adult cocktails of medicine that should not be given to kids, but they are. Small children, their brains will bleed out to stop the seizure in some of these cases. So we have different types of patients, we have different types of situations, and thank goodness I think everyone is here because they've either got someone in their place at home who's caring for a loved one right now, or right now we have the freedom to come and share this moment together. And I'm super grateful for that. And one of the last points I'll make, I have a lot of points to make. Has it been 3 hours yet? I don't know, I didn't bring my time up. One of the things I realized, I ran the numbers, and I'm like, why is the state interested in focusing on legalization and not so much patient needs? And they'll say it's taxes. But what I figured out was that based on our population and based on the percentage of consumers that we have, which my number was 250,000 possible consumers. I think Dr. Otto just mentioned 225,000. When you run those numbers for an ounce of weed every month, it is 0.03 something percent of our annual budget in our state. 0.03. That's what we're fighting for. So we're spending this effort on trying to get a 14% tax on medicine for 0.03% of the annual budget. So I don't know how many schools that builds. I don't know how Colorado managed to revamp everything in the world in their state with their revenue. But if we doubled that number to $200 a month, we're at roughly 0.07%. Right? If we double the number of patients, we get up to 1.4%. It just doesn't make sense at all to be distracted by tax revenue. And putting the money before the patients is not an okay thing to do either. And law enforcement has asked for 40% of that budget to do eradication. So if we do have the taxes, if we do pay the, let's say 0.7%, right, they're going to use 40% of that for eradication. Now, where I live in this remote area, it was ground zero back in the 80s for the drug war. The drug war has not stopped. We should all be very aware of that, especially since we flew Green Harvest missions on Kauai last year, right? Helicopters are flying around on Maui. All of this is going on, but if they pull the plants from our home market, if they eradicate plants from our home market, it's going to cause the price to go up. And when that price goes up, then they'll collect more taxes. And it could easily become this cycle of income, right? It's a new revenue stream for the state if they're able to do that. But this has been tried before. It has huge unintended consequences. A federal report released after, I forget what year it was, but the federal report kind of looked at what happened with the ice epidemic. And one of the things they pointed to was the artificial price controls that were put in place by eradicating the plant. So when they made cannabis more expensive, they made ice cheap. And I don't know about you, I can give you a real simple example. If you know someone in pain, they're gonna manage the pain. They're like, give me an aspirin, give me something. And if the dispensaries are closed, they're gonna spend $10 on a joint, or no, it can't go buy. They're gonna go spend $10 on a bottle of alcohol. And that's what typically happens, is people will self-medicate with whatever they can, and the alcohol is what's easiest to medicate with. It's not that they're looking to read, chapter 329 to find out if it's okay. They're managing pain. So, I hope that we don't get in that situation. We do know cancer rates are around 30%. And I hope that gives you a little bit of awareness going into it. One last thing, we do have the Palace Theater rented for 2025 for the Hawaii Cannabis Awards show. And we're going to honor all of our OGs, all of our legacy growers. This is an opportunity for people to nominate who you want, to go before the nomination committee, and then go before an awards committee, and then finally get selected as part of this show that we're going to throw on June 14th, Saturday, 2025. So hope to see you there. And thank you again, Kai. Thanks for making this happen.
Thank you, Brent, for that history on Medical Cannabis Day. We really appreciate it. Next up, we have JT, James Trice. James is doing his topic is important cannabis terminology. His bio is, for about 20 years, Mr. Trice has been an active advocate in the medical cannabis community. Whether it's researching or its medical benefits of cannabis or hemp, performing patient assessments and documenting vitals, helping patients register for the state 329 program, and volunteering with local VSOs to bolster their sustainable gardening programs. Mr. Trice is prominently known for his patient advocacy through events such as the 329 Veteran Stand Down, his past work with dispensaries such as patient education, smoking, and vape safety. Thank you, James.
Thanks for having me. Good morning, everybody. For a couple other faces, they didn't make it in, it's okay. I actually had a slideshow for you guys, but I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Doodly. It's kind of an animated like slide thing. Either way, it wasn't pulling up, so I'm just gonna have to try to get this going like this. But good morning, and especially to the new patients and caregivers. As we all know, well, I only have a little under 10 minutes to relay the message, so I'm going to try to speed through this because it was long. But if you miss anything, let me know, and I can try to get you the slides. I'm sorry, out of frame. So, a lot of times with new medications, we can get overwhelmed or confused with the names, like the over-the-counter name versus the generic name and things like that. For example, Tylenol typically equates to acetaminophen. And then you have things like how Motrin typically equates to ibuprofen. What about dronabinol? Is anybody familiar with dronabinol? Only a few people? Okay. Short history on dronabinol. Dronabinol is a synthetic THC, a form of synthetic THC, sorry. In 1985, dronabinol gained federal approval for treatment of HIV/AIDS, induced anorexia, as well as nausea and vomiting related to chemotherapy, things like that. This is where things kind of get a little tricky. What about other common terms that aren't interchangeable, things but still often get misused? Oftentimes, a lot of times, you hear words like marijuana being used in place for medical cannabis or sometimes even hemp. Marijuana is illegal, obviously, and is typically imported from Mexico and is of poor quality, while medical grade cannabis is typically grown in a well-controlled indoor atmosphere and must go through a number of rounds of testing prior to its consumption by our DOH patients here in Hawaii. Sorry. As you can see, I enjoy using my voice to advocate on behalf of patients, and I like to talk. And I place a strong emphasis on grammar. Grammar and clarity are keystones of communication, especially, sorry, Kai, especially when communicating multiculturally. Proper grammar and enunciation shows your respect to your audience, reassuring them of your knowledge and understanding of the subject, and maintaining their trust with your wisdom. Speaking of which, here are some terms that may be new to you, or words that you may hear often in regards to medical cannabis or hemp medicine, but aren't completely sure what they mean or why. So I've compiled a short list of roughly 12. I have some more again. If you'd like the complete list, I'll send you out the email, or email us at 808camo.org. The first one is 329. Hawaii, the term 329 is unique to Hawaii as, maybe I should stand closer to the speaker, it keeps going in and out. But the term 329 is unique to Hawaii as it relates to state statutes. Hawaii revised statutes, Title 19 of Health, 329 Uniform Controlled Substances Act, 329-121. Another term you may hear often now is medical, which is of or relating to or concerned with physicians or the practice of medicine, obviously. What about things like, I think Brent touched on, recreational use. A recreational drug is a drug typically such as cocaine, or like we said earlier, the marijuana, or most recently methamphetamines, that are used without medical justification for its psychoactive effects, on the belief that occasional use is, it's just okay, use it in moderation. There's adult use, and adult use is what most of us typically know for obviously being of age, legal age of consent to utilize alcohol. In Hawaii, I think it recently is up to, do we pass it at 21? Is it 21 now? Before it was a lot lower. It was actually 17. I think it was 16 in 2004. I have to check, but it was a very low age. So you can understand why some parents and elders would have concern with their young age, mid-teens, possibly consuming this medication. Something that we get a lot of confusion about, a term, is terms like sativa. Most commonly, we hear sativa used as the most common form of cannabis. It has very long, slim leaves, and the phrase itself typically means cultivated. Whereas one that we get related to hybrids called ruderalis. The root word of ruderalis is ruderol, meaning a plant that grows in spite of its environment or natural climate. It's often used to label wild strains or strains of hemp plants that have low THC content in them, typically. Specifically, ruderalis is a shorter version of the cannabis plant, hemp plant, and grows about 1 to 3 feet tall, typically, usually no more than 4 feet tall. And it has a very fast grow rate, typically harvests within it's like 7 to 8 weeks. It's a fast plant. Indica, typically considered, or what you hear as like the downer in the couch kind of cannabis, has the wider leaves. And though many cannabis clubs and dispensaries typically label most of their plant material, sativa and indica, based on their effects, the what we call up or down effects. But really, because it's such a broad spectrum of how each different land races and different strains of cannabis interact with each other, it's actually not too practical to use that as their way of classifying plants. because it's actually very inaccurate and typically more tests need to be conducted. Which brings me to terpenes. How many of you are familiar with the term terpenes? I know not everyone. Nice, at least half of you. A short definition of terpenes, a short understanding of terpenes rather, is where that cannabis itself has a high concentration of terpenes, which is why the plant is typically so pungent and odoriferous, yes? Some people obnoxious and it's very strong. There are 5 typical main terpenes found in the plant, such as pinene, that we typically find in things like rosemary and what the other was. Linalool, which smells more floral or kind of has a sweet flavor, sweet scent, to it, that you typically find in things like lavender. Limonene, which is things you find in citrus or like a orange or grapefruit scent. Whereas one many people are more familiar with, which is myrcene, that you find in things such as thyme and lemongrass, and carafeline, which has a more spicy or more woody, more smell to it, possibly nutty, like peppercorns or cloves. The reason why I bring those together in that manner is because a lot of people are familiar with these via their grandparents. I know I grew up. My grandmother stayed with a satchel or even a bowl of potpourri. Potpourri dish everywhere. We have one in Mama's room. We get one in the pretty room at the den. Ours was a very pretty room, so we call it the pretty room. But even coming in from football practice, you walk in, you're tired, but something about the smell of that scent, awakening, it reminds you of home. It's very familiar and very a comforting scent. So it's very interesting that you find many of these scents based in most, if not all, land races of hemp cannabis. So the potpourri. There is plenty of clinical trial data that supports the herbal synergy of cannabis and reaches far beyond those effects of the single components such as just the CBD or THC that we typically are usually mentioning. The way that cannabis can provide therapeutic relief through our sense of smell is phenomenal. Like we were just mentioning how the scent of the potpourri draws back to memories of home. Also, rather than smoking and risking inhalation burns from cannabis and cigars and inflammation of the lungs, maybe you prefer a potpourri array or someone who cannot utilize the edibles because of the different forms of nausea. Some people have stomach ulcers, whereas the syrups or the sugars that people use when they make their edibles, it acts in a way that is contrary, to their ailment. So it kind of irritates them. Another word that we hear often related to medical cannabis that it's more of a sour word, and I think it needs more clarification, and it's addiction. Words like addiction typically means it's a compulsive disorder, that's something that you are drawn to using or utilizing the substances, habit forming. Typically it's deeply psychological, but often muscle memory and physiological effects of things such as happiness or the lightness, the tingle you get, and things like that, typically drive most people's addictions. And it's very difficult to reach someone who is enjoying something, rather a patient who is not too geared towards medication, yes. Oftentimes, addiction as well, you see irritability, anxiety, and difficulty to communicate some of their emotions a lot of times. And for a caregiver, for a family member, that can be very heavy on your emotions. Some people who have elders who suffer from Alzheimer's or who suffer from dementia, and you definitely know you're trying to communicate with someone and you're trying to, emotional. But you're trying to help them and communicate something to them, and you just don't have the right words. But I say all that to say that even legally it matters. Something I've always been told from my elders was, you ask the right question, get the right answer. And more specifically for my local community, my Hawaiians, my Filipinos, who English is not their first language. So unfortunately, it's that much more important for them to have a strong understanding of the words, how to say, what to say, because not everything translates, as well. And sometimes what you hope to, the message you hope to get across doesn't always get relayed. So again, proper grammar, proper understanding that words have definitions and meanings, and knowing when to use them, and not to be more responsible even on social media when we're speaking on things. We're not labeling people or patients. We're not criminalizing patients. You see, though the words may be cumbersome at times, it is highly imperative that we say what we mean and mean what we say, especially regarding and speaking in health terms and when dealing with patients. If you would like this list, as well as, I'm sure I have a longer list of terms and any more information, especially for beginners, introductory caregivers who aren't really in the know, please feel free to reach out to me at 808camo.org. My name is James Trice. If you see me on Instagram, reach out to 808camo, at 808camo, sorry. And even on Twitter, although I'm not always on there, but I will respond at the same handle. Yes, at 808camo. So thank you for your time, and aloha.
Awesome. Thank you, James, for the insight of how we speak about cannabis. I do feel the words that we choose are very important. A lot of times the media is still using the M word, which does have a lot of ties to reefer madness. At the same time, we don't want to perpetuate propaganda, so it's important that we know the words that we choose to speak about the plant. Next up, we have Theo, and Theo is part of CAMO. He's going to talk about a declaration on patient equality. Mr. Theo Alexander is a U.S. Navy Gulf War veteran who served abroad and is highly decorated on the highly decorated aircraft carrier USS America. He earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Health Administration, and he was awarded the prestigious O. David Sparkman Chromatography Mass Spectrum. Thank you. You're adding in all these hard words for me. I'm gonna have you come up and speak about it. But yeah, we have Theo. He's also the co-founder of CAMO, the Chief Operating Officer of Complementary and Alternative Medicines of Oahu, a veteran-owned nonprofit organization where he assists clinicians and medical staff with processing 329 medical cannabis registry applications. Theo, come on up.
Appreciate that, Kai. How's everybody feeling today? Awesome. It's an awesome day. Thank y'all for coming out to this day, even though we had a little debacle yesterday with the power being knocked out here in downtown area. But this special day, this day, June 14th, 2024, we're here to celebrate Medical Cannabis Day. Again, a very important day for patients. I just want to address something real quick. caregiver as well. We had the gentleman talk about his care for his mom. You got to realize that when people are in need, you know, when you have someone to help you, when doctors can't help you. We know that cancer treatment has some remedies, but who's been cured from cancer? Okay. So when you try to make an attempt to do something for your loved ones, that should be respected. I too share that caregiving opportunity with my mother 2 years ago. She was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I too gave her RSO oil. She's still alive today, in remission. I really believe in it. Do the science. We have scientists here in the room today for that reason. We also have doctors and clinicians in the room today for that reason. So please, do your job as people in the audience and people in general. One day you may need cannabis. It treats a lot of different things, and we know this. So just do your homework. Google's our best friend today. AI is even better. So I just want to address that because, you know, there was some, an issue with one of our speakers because of what was being said and the care that was being given. And we know that FDA rules medical care, but guess what? We also have herbal medicine that's ancient. And we know that the pharmacopoeia in every nation that you can come in contact with does have cannabis in the pharmacopoeia. And I'm a believer. If you look at the Bible, you can Google cannabis in the Bible. You come up with all kind of things. Now, if you want to argue against the Bible, be a non-believer, that's your prerogative. But if you look at Exodus 30 and 23, it gives the recipe for the holy anointing oil, which every rabbi, including Jesus himself, carried. Now, I'm not going to blaspheme anything, but I'm going to tell you the truth about something. When we look at what cannabis does today, what it does with cataracts, you know, to help heal that. And I know we're not supposed to make a medical claim, and I'm not making a medical claim. I'm saying try it. If you have cataracts, try it. If your doctor hasn't introduced you to some form of cannabis, which is in the formulary, we have Epidiolex right now, we have Marinol, Dronabinol, Sesamet. These are all formulary drugs that have been there since maybe the late 80s. Okay, so one thing I also want to address is the reason we're here is not to be political. This is a patient's day. This is a clinician's day. It's an industry day. We almost had adult use. What does that mean? I don't know what that means. I'm an adult and I use cannabis. I have a 329 card. I do what I need to do to be respectful of the medicine, be respectful. And I also research. As Kai was saying, in my last credential, mind you, Trinity University in San Antonio, I have a master's in health administration. I've worked at the corporate level of healthcare. I've seen doctors have no solution for patients. This is a solution. Right? Okay, so I'm gonna get to it. One of the most important things you do when you go to the hospital, whether it's an emergency room or just a regular visit to your doctor, to your specialist, or whatever you want to call them. What happens is when you are discharged, you get some paperwork, right? Everybody knows that. Whether you read it or not, you should. Because if that paperwork does not include your rights as a patient, you better ask what your rights are. Because if something happens to you on that table, in the patient room, that you don't agree with, you have every right to complain. Not saying you need to go after your doctors or the clinicians here, because they're a part of our network. We need them. But as a patient, you have the right to ask. You have the right to defend yourself when it comes to something that's done inappropriately. So here today, I'm here to say this is a declaration of patient equality. Because as a cannabis patient, I don't feel like I'm equal. If you tell a doctor, whether you're at the VA or whether you are at an urgent care clinic, okay, we have the gamut of things we can go to right now. And you tell me you're using cannabis, if that doctor's not informed, if that PA's not informed, if that nurse is not informed, if that LPN or CNA is not informed, they think you're an addictive person, that you're using an illicit drug, which is far from what this is. Why isn't it in the ancient pharmacopoeias if it's an addiction drug? I don't quite get that. We have the science. We have the instruments that can tell you what's in the drug. And the constituents that they use in that drug, they have actually synthesized to make other drug formularies, okay? The same process. We know this. It's not being told. So let's get to it. A Hawaii Patient Bill of Rights for 329 medical cannabis registry patients. As a medical patient participating in the Hawaii State Medical Cannabis Registry Program, better known as the 329 Medical Cannabis Registry, you are entitled to the following rights to ensure your direct access to healthcare services are protected and respected. These rights are in accordance with Hawaii state law, guess what, and the regulations. So how can we be illicit customers to the medical system if we are abiding by law? I don't get that yet. Why are we still fighting politically to state that? When physicians, we're in a physician's care when you get that card, okay? One of the things I'm going to address, though, in this Bill of Rights is the follow-up services that are not given to or promoted to regular patients that are cannabis users, okay? When is the last time you got your cannabis card for those who are cannabis patients and your doctor said, come see me in a week, come see me in 30 days, come see me every quarter? We don't get that right, and we have that right as patients. So I do declare rights, general rights for 329 medical cannabis patients. And this is nothing that's foreign. Like I said, when you get discharged from your hospital or from your doctor, you always get that piece of paper, and most of the time it has a patient bill of rights. Every hospital system, every state has to have a patient bill of rights as a part of their policy. I know this because I've developed these policies throughout the nation. So, first, you have the right to access healthcare services. You have the right to access initial appointments and follow-up procedures for the medical care and treatment, including the use of medical cannabis, authorized by a licensed physician or advanced practice nurse, or APRN. You have the right of non-discrimination. You have the right to receive medical care services without discrimination based on the status as a registered medical cannabis patient. You have the right to confidentiality. Confidentiality regarding your medical cannabis use. You know, one thing that we've done for people who are operating in the industry, even DOD employees, is when you have that drug analysis test, when your boss says, hey, go check in, it's nothing that is suspicious or nefarious, but you know, maybe you're doing that because you want to get a job. If you're a medical cannabis patient, what you need to know is, once you report to their lab, present your card before that person talks to you. They record that in your medical record, so that if you are found with cannabinoids in your system, that is not to be reported to your employer. That is a violation of HIPAA, okay? That is your right. If they report that anyway and something happens to you at your job, like you get fired, guess what? You can sue anybody in that line that provided that opportunity for you to be out of work. Remember that. If you go to a drug analysis, present your card first. Don't go in there and piss in the cup. Excuse my French. You got, you know, people not. When you go in there and urinate in the cup, okay, you've already submitted your sample. At that point, you don't have any rights, okay? So do it before. As soon as you check in, I have a cannabis card, I want to state that. I want it in my record. That protects you, so remember that. You have the right to consent. You have the right to receive comprehensive information about your medical condition and treatment options, including the benefits and risks associated with the use of medical cannabis, allowing you to make informed decisions about your care. Again, when was the last time you had to follow up with your doctor to talk about what you're doing with cannabis? When the last time you went to the dispensary and talked to the bud tender and said, hey man, you know, this product is great, but I'm having some side effects to it. Can you tell me about that? It's not happening, and we're gonna make it happen. You have the right to participate in treatment decisions. You have the right to actively participate in your decisions regarding your medical treatment, including the choice of medical cannabis, and to preferences respected, and have your preferences respected. Meaning that when you tell your doctor that you are utilizing cannabis to treat your symptoms or your condition, if he pushes back on you, you might want to get another doctor or get him better informed. Give him a couple of websites, a couple of research papers, they're out there. Just Google. Use AI, whatever you got to do, they're out there. You have people like us and people in this room who are informed. You have doctors who are informed here in Hawaii. Hawaii was the first state in 2000 to tell the Medical Society that we're going to do this. As medical patients, you have the right to medical care. You can tell your doctor what you take, and don't be scared to do that. If he is abrasive with you, you might want to find another doctor. Specific rights to 329 medical cannabis patients. The right to legal protection. You have the right to protections under the Hawaii state law as a registered medical cannabis patient, including protection from arrest, prosecution, penalties of the medical cannabis, penalties for the use of medical cannabis in accordance with the law. I'll give you an example. Brent, you was talking about your mother. I just said that, you know, I was in the same position you were in a couple of years ago during COVID. I had to move my mom to Rochester, Minnesota for Mayo's Clinic, where she received her cancer treatment and her radiation therapy. Okay? The first appointment I had with her oncologist, I told him that I've had her on a regimen of 1 gram of RSO a day, and she's doing okay. Because he was surprised that she was so alert with her condition. She was at phase 3. Okay? My mother has a lot of other complications when it comes to allergies to drug medication preservative. She cannot take what you call generic drug because there's so many there are so many preservatives in the drug that there's barely any active ingredient, okay? So she's allergic to most things like that. So using cannabis, a natural drug or a natural substance, was helping her to alleviate pain, nausea, all the things that come with cancer care or cancer treatment. The doctor was very abrasive. He was a young guy, just got there, Mayo's Clinic, you know, probably had a little ego, but I humbled him a little bit. So I said, look, if you're gonna tell me I can't treat my mother with this, well then we're gonna find another doctor. How about that? That got his attention. And then I gave him a couple of links. I sent him to clinicaltrials.org. I told him to Google, since you're a researcher. I told him to Google cannabis and how it's used to mitigate cancer, symptoms. I told him to Google our good friend and colleague, Dr. Sue Sisley, who has completed the only FDA clinical trial of veterans using cannabis to treat PTSD, okay? This is clinical trial FDA, okay? You can't argue with the results. You can argue about why, but so he exited the room and went and looked up a couple of these things. And I also, before he left the room, I informed him that Mayo's Clinic was one of the leading researchers in cannabis research, okay? Mayo Clinic leads a lot of things in cannabis in research, but he didn't know because he was a new guy, and he just thought he was going to come in there and push drugs on my mom. Which cancer treatment is, you know, it is what it is. But I know that there's some help with the symptoms and side effects. So when he came back into the room, he had a different opinion. He said, wow, I didn't know we had a dispensary system here. Wow, I didn't know doctors was actually writing this card for patients to, and then the patients that are on the card had a better outcome. So he was enlightened. And to this day, he changed his practice as far as his treatment plans. He now includes cannabis, and he even writes the cards, dig that. So, you know, that was a proud moment for me, personally, but a good win for Mayo's. Have a guy like that listen, you know. Sorry about that, you know. It's kind of if you've never been a caregiver, especially people are terminal. Let's get back to it. You have the right to legal protection. You have the right to legal protection under the Hawaii state law as a registered medical cannabis patient, including protection from arrest, prosecution, and penalties. I read that. You have the right to access medical cannabis. You have the right to obtain medical cannabis and or cannabinoid-based therapeutics from licensed dispensaries within the state from your qualified caregiver. This includes the right to purchase and this includes the right to purchase and possess an adequate supply as determined by the state regulations. And I want to put a caveat to that. There's products on this table right here that are produced and manufactured in an FDA registered lab, okay? Same thing that they do for pharmacies and how they manufacture the drugs, same lab. There's an ISO 17025 license for them to produce things like that, right, and analyze it. These products are produced in the same lab, but guess what? These products are all botanical. There is nothing synthetic in them. The main ingredients, and there's a lot of main ingredient in there as far as active, is CBD, CBG, CBV, CBN. Just keep going down the list of maybe, I don't know, they haven't even discovered all the cannabinoids, but we have a list of at least 35 they're working with right now. And these are for human consumption and for pets. You have the right to these. These are over-the-counter drugs. But because we have put so much into the production of those by qualifying ourselves with a FDA registration, then these products are sold behind the pharmacy counter, but over-the-counter sale. And they're a little pricey, you know, but what's the price of health? It wouldn't be so pricey if we didn't have to source this cannabinoid and pay all these licenses just to produce it. You know, everything should be analyzed and looked at before you give it to a person, true. But if you already meet that criteria and your label's correct, what's preventing us from helping each other? When you go into Walmart, when you go into Target, when you go into CVS, any of these other drugstores, and you buy those drugs and vitamins out of that counter, I challenge you to do some research today. Because there was a research that came out maybe 2015 that said that 85% of the things on that shelf did not have any ingredients that was on the label. How do you feel about that? Go to the gas station and get gas and it's water. How are you going to feel about that? This is what you're getting, literally. Sorry for getting off the subject, but you have a right to quality products. You have the right to access safe and quality tested medical cannabis products. Dispensaries and qualified caregivers are required to adhere to medical mandated standards of cultivation, processing, and distribution. You have a right to employment protection. You have the right to not be discriminated against in employment based solely on your status as a medical cannabis patient. Employers are encouraged to make reasonable accommodations in compliance with these state laws. Okay. You have the rights to healthcare settings. You have the right to respect and dignity. You have the right to be treated with respect and dignity and consideration by all healthcare providers and staff, regardless of your choice of medical cannabis use. I don't know about any of you guys, but I've been on that side when I'm going there to be treated and the doctor's like, oh, you smoke dope. Like, no, doc, I don't smoke dope. Unless dope stands for a Declaration of Patient Equality, I don't smoke dope. You know, I smoke medical cannabis. I intake medical cannabis, either topically, I ingest it through tincture, or I put it in a food product. There's nothing worse than a doctor telling you you're doing something wrong to help yourself and you know it's helping. I'm not hell-bent on doctors, don't get me wrong, but some of them need to study a little bit more. They have these credentials that we go in there, we trust them with our lives. We trust with them our loved ones' lives. And sometimes medical science doesn't quite compute. You have the right to, your rights in healthcare settings, rather. You have the right to follow-up care. You have the right to the necessary medical follow-up appointments after a visit to the medical cannabis doctor to register for the 329 medical cannabis program. This includes no less than 1 visit per quarter or 4 visits per year for ongoing assessment and management for your medical condition, including the participation in the research and development of cannabinoid therapeutic and nutraceutical supplements. And I say that because this is something that's not being practiced, but most doctors have to take a Hippocratic oath. That first part of the oath says, do no harm, okay? If you're not doing harm to yourself taking the substance, what's the doctor's problem? The doctor's problem is he has an FDA contract. Or should I say contract, or should I say, I'll leave it alone. But they administer and prescribe drugs based on their education. Right now at John A. Burns, they don't teach an elective on medical cannabis, but they do teach an elective on herbal medicine. And that herbal medicine is ancient, you know, it's remedies. You have, how do you say, lapa'au, Hawaii lapa'au. So, what'd you say? La'au lapa'au, exactly. Myself being Native American and black, we also practice ancient Indian techniques in medicine. I'm sure everybody in here has some kind of heritage or an uncle or a grandparent that try to teach you how to use something that was grown in the yard to remedy a cold at least, right? You have the right to continuity of care. You have the right to receive continuous and coordinated care. Healthcare providers should not deny or discontinue treatment solely because based on your legal or based on your legal medical use of cannabis. And you should challenge your doctor. Next time you go to renew your card, I don't care who the doctor is, and I know most of them, say, hey doc, can I come see you in at least 3 weeks? Can I come talk to you about what am I doing? You know? Because sometimes you need that push from your doctor. You need some confidence. Because we keep getting beat down as patients saying that we're doing something wrong. You know? And I don't really agree with that, but you know, we all have to participate in this thing called society. But individually, take the option to ask your doctor when I'm going to see you again. If he says next year, just tell him that's not good enough. You want to come see him at least once a quarter. You have the right to emergency care. You have the right to receive emergency medical medicine services without delay or prejudice, regardless of your status as a medical cannabis patient. Meaning that when EMSA or EMT comes to rescue you, God forbid, and you're taking cannabis, sometimes they hesitate. I've seen it. I've been in this position. And you tell them, they ask you, have you taken any illicit drugs? Have you had anything to drink? And all these questions. I use medical cannabis, and I have a medical cannabis card. But they don't know how to treat that. They don't know what to do. They will withhold medication and treatment sometimes. I've seen it happen. You have the right to access information and education. You have the right to receive education and information about medical cannabis from your healthcare provider, including how it can be integrated into your overall treatment plan. Who here in this room has experienced that when a doctor says, this is what you can take for your condition, but you know, keep taking your pharmaceutical, but this is something that can alleviate some of the side effects of some pharmaceuticals that I'm giving you. Has anybody in the room ever heard a doctor say, you can do this as part of your treatment plan? Crickets. That's scary. But something that has so much potential. Enforcement and advocacy. Right to advocacy. You have the right to seek assistance from your patient advocacy organizations to ensure that your rights are upheld and to receive support in navigating the medical cannabis program and related healthcare services. Thank God for CAMO, because this is what we do. Ever since 2017. Reason why? Being veterans, we have 22 patients a day dying of suicide. Okay? These school shootings and other things that are happening around in our nation, when the veterans are there, what they're not saying is that these guys are on antidepressants with no remedy. Because when they go to the VA, which I'm a strong supporter of the VA, and we're changing some things there in the policies when it comes to how they look at cannabis and cannabis treatments actively right now. If you Google that in the headline, that's something that's being discussed right now, right? They're saying doctors may or may not be able to write cards for veterans who are seeking the 329 program participation, okay? Which is a very important announcement. You have the right to legal recourse. You have the right to speak legal recourse. You have the right to seek. You have the right to seek legal recourse if your rights as a medical cannabis patient are violated, including filing complaints with appropriate regulatory agencies and pursuing legal action if necessary. You know, one thing I tell docs sometimes when I'm in their appointment is, doc, one day there's going to be a group of citizens get together and they're going to pursue their rights together in a class action. Because how can you have a medical cannabis system without protecting the rights of patients? I don't get that. That violates the Hippocratic oath. Most physicians, I think, do care. You know, I work with a lot of physicians, you know, and I can say that the majority do care. Some of them are kind of, you know, they're more rigid when it comes to understanding other alternative means of treatment and healthcare. But what I say to the medical community today is we're here to celebrate the respect of the medicine and to educate and to advocate. Because what Dr. Otto said in his opening comments was, you know, when he stated, do patients have the right to interstate use of the medication? That is an important question, okay? Because why am I being told that I can't take my medicine on the plane? It's not gonna blow up. It's not going to do anything else except for go into my body and help me. No one's going to pick it up and use it. If they do, they'll probably be a happier person. But that is not what medical patients do. We are very protective of our medicine because of how things are shaping up for us legally. I would say continue the fight. Continue to fight for this plan. I'm going to end this by saying, this is a quotation. By understanding and asserting these rights, we ensure that our healthcare needs, including the use of medical cannabis, are met with respect, dignity, and legality. We, the 329 Medical Cannabis Patient Registry, are committed to supporting our health and well-being in accordance with Hawaii state laws and regulations. We're not the ones violating the laws, but we often get violated. Have you ever been arrested for medicating? I have. It's a shame. The judge looked at us and said, "You got a card, why did the guy take you to jail?" "I don't know, Judge. Can you talk to your boys?" But what I do want to bring to your attention as an exclamation point is we have products on the table, as I mentioned, but also we have lays out here, our wrist lays, that one of our medical cannabis providers, or should I say, one of our therapists made last night. These lays are representative of today, celebrating Medical Cannabis Day here at the Capitol. And if you don't mind, CAMO is a 501c3 nonprofit. We do take donations. You can have a lay just to wear that and remind yourself of what you did today. But also, if you don't mind, there's a QR code there. Maybe $5, whatever you can give. This is what we do. This is the very first time this has happened at the Capitol. If we want to continue this, we have to support each other, right? And I thank you guys for coming out, and aloha.
Awesome. Thank you, Theo, for that wonderful speech. We have a next person speaking, but he just had to step out for a minute, so it gives me a chance to kind of recap something that had jumped in my mind as we had the last couple of speakers. I heard the word addiction, and I know in a medical setting that word gets kind of, I don't say tossed around, but it's very easy to mention addiction with any type of, I guess, illicit drugs. And because cannabis has been in the Schedule 1, people already assume and think they can use the same language. However, I don't know any other so-called drug in Schedule 1 or even 3 that has that works with the endocannabinoid system. So when people talk about addiction, it hits me hard when I'm thinking of a person who has an autoimmune disease or a person that has cancer or epilepsy, and they use medical cannabis to help treat themselves. If they use it for a prolonged time, are they addicted? And I would say no, because they're using it for health and wellness. They're using it to work with their endocannabinoid system to help regulate their body, their temperature, their mood, their appetite. I used to work in a dispensary for about 3 years. I was on the front line, which means I got to talk to patients every day, and I got to hear directly from them what some of the issues and how the medicine was helping them. Nobody ever came in and says, "You know what, I think I'm addicted." Most people came in and said, "Hey, you know what, I appreciate the medicine. This is working for me, but I'm really interested in more information and more education." And that's what this day has been based around, is information and education. A lot of times we might not have been exposed to the same content from each speaker, but this is a way we can all come together and share the information, share the knowledge, and just appreciate each other's thoughts and opinions, because they're all from everyone's own perspective. So I think that's what's really neat about this event, is that it definitely brings different viewpoints together, and none of them is valid. They're all valid. They're just different parts and points that people have experienced. So, so with that, I think it's very important that we, come here with an open mind. We might hear something that we've never heard before, and we're just grateful for the chance and opportunity to, have this day to come together and to kind of share, because that's what we're going to need going forward is the ability to keep sharing each other's perspective and each other's stories, because they really do mean a lot. And I, thank you for everyone who's in attendance. Thank you for everyone that's being able to watch this replay. I'm very appreciative, and we wouldn't really have the opportunity without Representative Kahaloa and her team. So thank you, Representative Kahaloa and her team and her staff. Our next speaker is going to be Bobby Adila, a physician assistant. He's going to be speaking about a better understanding of clinical applications. Mr. Adila is a veteran of the Special Forces Division. He utilizes his knowledge to help treat veterans suffering from PTSD and traumatic brain injuries. He is very distinguished, having dual fellowship training in oncology at MD Anderson Cancer Center and integrative medicine at the Arizona School of Medicine. He is also a Master of Physician Assistant Studies and a Fellow of the American Psychiatric Association. Please welcome Mr. Adila.
Hello. Just to correct a couple of things there, yeah. PA, I was brought on by actually a colleague friend from Stanford to go to, and I live in Kona. I was an associate director there with one of the clinics, and I have Aloha Regenerative Health. And actually getting involved as a veteran, I'll tell you a story, and then, kudos to Theo here. I think everyone's got a story, personal, caregiver, otherwise. I'll tell you about myself. Veteran Armed Forces, Navy, Marines. I was a corpsman. Spent some time overseas, and actually had a situation where I came up with a blood disorder that was rare a couple years ago. Found myself facing death probably 2 or 3 times, and that was not in the combative arena, but made some changes, personal and otherwise. And I think one thing to talk about, while we're here today, as far as with cannabis, we know it's been demonized in the past. You hear a reefer, buzz, somebody coming to you as a provider, and somebody comes to me and it's like, oh, this is somebody that's probably seeking something else in addition to him smoking at home, or what have you, which is unfortunate. And I think we can break that down, which I will. But I think looking at the grand scheme of things, I was thinking how to approach this, and probably just from a clinical application oversight and what I've been involved with, practices in academia. I come from Florida originally. I think we got to put in perspective the Veterans Administration healthcare entity. So it's the largest entity we have in the country for training, physicians, PAs, mid-levels, nurses alike. So that being in of itself, one of the tragedies that I see personally, because I was a product of the system, the treatment, and I changed my treatment, and that's why I'm standing here today. But nothing against, I can tell you, and being involved with spearheading a cancer support group at Lake Nona, VA in Orlando, Florida. As much as you hear the good, bad, and the ugly, you probably hear more bad. Excellent care there. They have a model that should be replicated. Now, that being said, understanding a little bit more about the entity in and of itself and talking to key people, boots on the ground here, I've been able to talk and have good dialogue and narrative. Theo Alexander, perfect example as far as seeing the need there. What can we do? And what needs to be done? Someone brought up earlier some of the key things we're seeing with vets. So we talk about depression, anxiety, irritability. And a lot of that can stem from the acute and chronic pain secondary to IED, blast injuries, post-concussive syndromes, PTSD, TBI. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that. I dealt with that. I've had post-concussive syndrome myself from a helicopter incident. And so I can relate firsthand, but part of me with what I had to deal with a couple years ago and go through treatment gave me different perspective. So now it's a new purpose for life for me. And with cannabis and some of the things we see how it's evolved, the passing 329 amendment and the support, and actually one of the senators, Mass, I believe, from Florida, who was part of the committee in passing for the approval of passing the amendment, said it perfectly. You know, we're at a status quo right now. You know, veterans aren't getting not just the quality of care that they need, because obviously going out, harm's way, you're patriotic, you served your country, which, you know, the fabric is tearing away to some degree. I'm not going to get into that, but come back, we should give them at least equal care, if not better. And why I say better, when I give talks, lectures, 2 administrations ago, there was some subsidizing and funding for the improvement of VA provisions and health care. It's like, okay. And it was said, we need equal care. So no, you need better care. And why is that? Because you're out in harm's way, you're dealing with chemicals. I was exposed to that. So I'm having to educate some of my colleagues and peers why you need to look at and the global discovery assessment. That's what I teach. That's what I do with patients. So you're looking at everything, not just, oh, you're coming in, oh, you got a scratch here, oh, you got an upper respiratory infection, oh, you got an ear infection. A veteran is different. You know, I want to look, how are you sleeping? I want to look at bioinflammatory hormonal markers. That's what I do. A lot of that's because of physical damage in hypothalamic pituitary axis. The pituitary is disrupted. We've done extended imaging to show that there's some disruption. It's not being looked at. So by virtue of that, if I have a patient come in, and I'm just going to give you a scenario, and hopefully this kind of helps, what we're going to be able to do now is like, no, I'm not going to load you up on opioids. I'm not going to just have to where you're not functioning. And part of understanding the patient is like, what's your home life like? Okay, what did you experience before on the combative theater? What's it like at home now? And you'll hear some horror stories. I had a good friend of mine. Josh is about 36 now. Great guy. Saw his best friend blown up in front of him. Comes back home. He just wants to spend time with his family and his kids. And his wife basically just shunned him away. So he basically went into suicidal ideation. He's doing good now. That's classic. You bring up 23 a day, you know, and that could change from month to month. It shouldn't be like that. You know, a lot of that is here, what I see here coming to Tripler. I see some of these guys are waiting as vets. Active duty takes precedence. They're waiting for 4 hours. Oh, I'm sorry, you know, we can't see you now. So who's going to want to come back and continue that care? So we have to change the branding. We have to change the approach. It's not just funding that comes in. Allocated funding, that looks good. If I have a sub-community here, hey, I'm going to give you 20% increase in personnel that's going to be able to see your vets. I don't want to hear that. You have to change, and I talk with you. Until you change the protocol, algorithm, and construct, and how they transition from active duty to veteran status, which is key, which, by the way, researchva.gov, if I recall correctly, stats they have out on their surveys is that vets that are transitioning from active duty to veteran status, military personnel, 50% are not happy with the continuity of care or the disruptive health care. And then 3 to 6, 9 months later, still not happy. I think 50% is a light number. So they're not even given equivalent care. So we talked about the problem before, like Representative Senator Massa in Florida, you got a status quo. So it's like, I'm not going to give you, this question is like, I can give somebody else a card for the day from the state, but I can't give it to you. And it's like, you're probably more in need, undoubtedly. So that's personal with me, just in and of itself. I mean, when you look at it without getting into the science, the cannabinoid system, there was a physician that, if I recall from Israel, I think it was in 1962, that made it known. It's like, hey, we got a viable biologic system that works well with neurotransmitters. And with CBD1, 2, cannabidiol, part of it, THC, we know the psycho component. There's a lot of things to be broken down. Someone mentioned terpenes earlier. There's different proteins and compounds. We're looking specific to certain conditions. So if I see a vet come in, just to get back and not too far off the subject itself, I want to see what's his current state like right now. You know, especially concerned with suicidal ideation. There's a lot of things that are missed. I've had the opportunity, someone mentioned being Native American. I'm part Native South American. My family's from Colombia, which you can get interesting things that automatically think, you know, hey, Doc, can you give me some, you know, and it's like, hey, it doesn't work like that. You know, there has to be regulations. You know, I say that half jokingly, but I think it goes hand in hand. I've had the opportunity where dealing with numerous vets in Florida, some out here, but primarily as far as experience in Florida, where they're having to go out and, hey, there's so-and-so that can get you this. And we could talk about some other things as far as herbals, natural herbals. I think where I was at. One key thing that kind of sharing with some of you guys is one key thing. We talked about suicidal ideation, and obviously one is too many. So if you have people waiting there in Tripler, and it's like they're not going to feel confident with the system, and it's like by virtue of numbers, categorically, you can say by the end of that week or even by the month, it's like somebody will actually fall in that category. Ironically, I get a lot that ask, it's like, well, some of the means by which we're treating psychoactive SSRIs, and we know this as providers, there's a small thing in there that says suicidal ideation, which doesn't make sense. It's like, why am I going to give this to you? And someone referenced the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm. So there's some irony there. It's that's how I was trained initially, and I started looking beyond and outside the scope of conventional practice, just because I was frustrated with a lot of different things, and then it became personal for me. Getting on track, I think it's one is understanding the system, the support, the passing with the cannabis. As an alternative, a lot of the symptoms that you see, it comes from an uncontrollable pain issue, a huge number. So if you're able to address that, then you're going to improve the quality of life. That sleep profile is going to improve. Thereby anxiety, irritability, and further things that I do, which I've taught others, it's just not accepted as far as in format for clinical practices. I look at hormonal levels and bioinflammatory markers. One key thing that I can tell you that I've seen at 3 different places being involved, whether anecdotally writing a soft white paper, is that you have disruption and a decline of testosterone with individuals that have had blast injuries and post-concussive syndrome. And these are ranging, not your older males, primarily male. These were as young as 24 years old. So when you look at that and you restore that, you can see the addition or as an adjunct to, if we were talking about cannabis, as a better means than some of the other conventional approaches when looking at as far as pain modulated therapy and what it does to the life, the functionality and how active that patient can be in their lives. I mean, I get a lot of young, they're still, able to go out there by virtue of age, and they just can't because they have issues with pain. And I can guarantee you that I see it's just they're having problems sleeping. There's problem with relationships, that interaction. You don't sleep, that's one thing that I encourage and I teach others. You don't get that patient asleep, you can't really rely on everything. The objective findings that you come across, unless you improve that, if they're really, have some psychosocial mental issue, that is one of the most important things. I learned that the hard way myself. Even teach that with athletes. I deal with sports athletes as well. We got 2 Olympic athletes back in our clinic in Florida that we're dealing with. But I think from that perspective, another thing to key in on is I try to help patients take accountability, which is key. Because a lot of these medications, not tuned in with side effect, adverse reactive profile. But sometimes I'm talking with patients and saying, well, why are you taking this? So I don't know. My doctor says, just gave it to me. And it's like, well, don't you want to know what you're putting in your body? And, I try to get, because I spend a little more time with patients. And not to defend, say one way or another, insurance allows, and they're kind of setting the guidelines for how medicine should be practiced. And I think it's not just a practice of medicine, but practice of health, and health and wellness. I look at things, my specialty area where I do now is anti-aging regenerative medicine. And that's why I was brought out to Hawaii. So when you look at that, when you look at traumatic brain injury that's not resolved and taken care of appropriately in a timely manner, or at least diagnosed for treatment, you actually shorten your lifespan, and we're seeing that already. So if we can saturate those receptor sites, they've actually done some protein analysis post-mortem and looked at proteins that when in a traumatic situation, there's some suggestion, even from Israel, pray for those people over there going through it, but they have plenty of people to actually see in a wartime situation, that if they're using a cannabis CBD and looking at some terpenes combination with the psychoactive component in times of need, within 12 hours after an incident can show that it can be more neuroprotective for the body, as well as with motosensory. So anyways, any other particular questions? Because I could probably go on in some of my experience, but I think this is a huge milestone, or where we're going into, and part of my fight is to really get improved healthcare, but with changing the algorithm of how we're treating these guys, especially transitioning. One thing is helping bridge the gap between active duty to veteran status. And one goal here, even working with Theo on a big project, this could help set precedents and replicate and duplicate this with other VSO and veterans around the country, which could have an impact in changing healthcare in and of itself. So I'm hoping that can come to fruition.
Thank you for your words, Mr. Odila. Next up, we have Chad Miller of Mad Chiller Extracts. His topic is going to be cannabis in Hawaii, his personal experience and recovery from alcoholism. Chad is raised on Oahu. He has been a huge proponent of medical cannabis in Hawaii, a patient in California and Hawaii since 2006. Cannabis has played a major role in his life for many years. His knowledge and love for cannabis has continued to expand as a consultant, hash maker, most recently becoming Hawaii's first ganjier, cannabis sommelier. Patient and community advocacy have played a major role in his ability to help educate and provide awareness around patient access to the plant. His mission is to continue to educate and expand his knowledge around cannabis to support Hawaii's growth of medical and adult use cannabis. He shares his experience as a patient and caregiver for the plant. Please welcome Chad.
Close this out real fast. Cool. Aloha, everyone. I want to start by thanking Kai for having me here today and being able to speak on my personal experience with medical cannabis here in Hawaii. Yeah, let's get started. First off, do I even need this? No. First off, I've been a medical patient for cannabis and using cannabis probably since my middle teens, but I've had a medical cannabis card since 2006, going to college in California. Over the past years, I kind of a little information about myself. Become a consultant, hash maker, and cannabis enthusiast, working here locally. I've had the ability to travel to Spain, New York, California, as well as multiple seminars and events, and competed in world competitions. Last year, I was a scholarship recipient for the Ganjier, which is a cannabis sommelier program in Humboldt, California, passed on by Frenchie Cannoli and a bunch of other legends that are helping educate people around the endocannabinoid system and cannabis as a whole as an alternative medicine, which I think is huge and needs to be emphasized more everywhere. Education is number one. I think it is impossible to have medical cannabis or adult use or any type of usage of cannabis without people properly understanding and being educated of the use and non-harm. We've had a lot of negativity around this plant, and it's time to free the plant and provide what resources it can do. We have a lot of pharmaceutical options out there in this world, many of which that come with a lot of side effects. I'd love to see cannabis more emphasized and used in people's recovery and health and wellness. So I could, in this platform, talk negatively about our current medical program. I think some of the people, if not all of you in here, know of our failures, our current failures and major issues with our current program. We have probably the highest per capita use of cannabis, however, the smallest program for medical cannabis patient usage in the United States, which which is just sad. It shows that we don't have people participating. We need to educate people to understand how this medical program is available to them and how they can protect themselves and get access to that. My mission is to better the program for all medical cannabis patients, and that starts with access to affordable medication and education. Again, there's so many uses and applications of this plant, not just smoked, ingested, or topically, and I'll go into some of those. We've talked this past year. I feel like this has been kind of a deflating year. I can say that on a personal level, but also as a medical cannabis community member. We failed at adult use, which I didn't agree 100% on. However, as a global market and US market, it is continuing to evolve, and our state needs to pay close attention on how we adapt and change in order to have a share in that marketplace, but also for our patients and citizens to be able to benefit from these programs. I want to help fix our current program and prepare for adult use. I think it's super important. It's inevitable in this state and globally. I don't know if you guys are familiar. I got to go to Spain and see the evolutions in Europe. We're seeing it all throughout Asia. A lot of the changes that are coming around cannabis and opening up laws as well as medical options for people. It's super important that we have a group that takes care of this program. Like they refer to it as Cannabis Authority. We need people to run and monitor this program and make sure that it does not fail. I think we have an example of that in 16 years of providing access, and then the current system that isn't getting support. There's many reasons I could go into that, but we can talk about that on a different time. I came up with this little saying when Kai asked me to do this. I grew up here in the islands. I went away to school and got drug tested every single sport I played because they thought I was from Hawaii and we smoked HONOLULU. And that has become a legacy that we talk about here in Hawaii, and that our ability to produce amazing medicine here on these islands. However, we talk about it, but it's just a legacy. Are we going to do something about it, or are we just going to be telling stories of it? I think it's super important for Hawaii to participate in this marketplace. Agriculture is huge. You talk about our representatives talking about how we need to push for ag and so forth. This is a great opportunity. It's not like our state doesn't have needs and areas of need. We've seen other states come in and properly allocate and direct funding to certain issues such as schools, roadways, most importantly our homelessness and mental health crisis here in the state. I don't know if anybody knows anyone that's been involved in the mental crisis here locally, but to say it is underserved is an understatement. It's really sad. People are dying from not having access, let alone the programs being so backed up that people can't even be seen to get medications. People are going into Queens, not being serviced, given gnarly medications and pushed out on the streets. And that is not right. It's also a major issue for our community as a whole. And I feel that medical cannabis can play a crucial role in helping with that. Ability for locals to participate. Since the war on drugs, people from Hawaii have been criminalized for their participation with this plant. I personally, as well as many of family members and friends that have been prosecuted or looked at upon negatively or had negative consequences for their use or participation in these programs. That's just sad. This state has so much opportunity to help its community through this plant. I cannot overemphasize how important it is for us as a community to make sure that the people that are involved in this program are from here, have ties here, that they're able to go and participate in these programs, own licenses, work in this industry, and be able to provide for their families, and that money stays here in the islands. From what we've seen with caregiver system to people being able to grow for other people under a cooperative setting. We have seen the full-on attack of those patients and the people providing for them. That's just unjust and wrong, and we can continue to go on how things need to change moving forward to make sure that patients have access to affordable medication and that people of Hawaii can participate in this medical program and provide for their families. My personal experience, I moved home in 2017 in an attempt to step away from alcohol and my recovery from alcoholism. I have my MBA, I've participated in working commercial real estate, commercial sales, marketing, advertising. We used to work locally here for KHON. I cannot state enough how much medical cannabis has helped me in my recovery from alcohol. It's something that is frowned upon in AA and even in medicine with doctors and nurses. They see cannabis as a drug and that you're continuing down that addiction, road of addiction. And the truth is, I would not be standing here in front of you, 6 years sober, a father and husband, if it wasn't for medical cannabis. Not only my use, but finding a passion in being able to help others through cannabis. Most specifically, people will frown upon this, but I was able to work with one of our cooperatives in helping medical cannabis patients, and there's nothing more rewarding than being able to provide somebody in need, whether it be for quality of living as they transition or in making a change in their life and aiding them in living better. I just want to kind of go into, I went into that about being able to help people. I don't really need to talk too much on that. There's amazing stories out there. You've heard Brent talk about it, deal with his mother. There are thousands of examples of people that have stepped across a barrier of saying, I'm going to do whatever it takes to help my family members. I have a stepmother who has stage 4 ovarian cancer and will not touch the products because of the mental and laws and what has been perpetuated against it. Fortunately, I have had examples of working with lots of patients that have had success, from children with tumors to other patients with ovarian cancer that are in recovery, people with pain issues, blood pressure, the list goes on. I just want to kind of share something. I had an article wrote by one of the larger hash companies in the world, based out of Canada, called Hashtag, about my solventless RSO application. Most RSO is derived using ethanol extraction, and that's great, but there are also many more benefits and opportunity through the extracted matter of that plant. Non-decarboxylated and carboxylated, as well as terpenes that play a major role in aiding our endocannabinoid system. So this is just a little testimonial story that I did regarding my mother. My mom had skin cancer on her arm. This was actually the point where her eye watch went, but it doesn't matter. She's got skin cancer throughout her body, or examples of skin cancer. She came out to visit me for my wedding and showed me this growth on her arm. Within 3 weeks of applying this solventless RSO, which incorporates those two aspects, the non-decarboxylated as well as the decarbed, and as well as the inclusion of terpenes, a simple infusion to MCT oil, and after 3 weeks, my mother's growth dissipated and disappeared, as you can see in these pictures. She still goes to her dermatologist on a quarterly basis, and they do not find anything. The original procedure would have needed to go 1 inch wide and a ½ inch deep to remove that growth. Pain, suffering, so much more by a simple application with a Band-Aid. No science, no extraction. I'm seriously talking about taking the patties off of a pressed extracted matter and soaking it in MCT oil with heat pressure. Super simple,
unbelievable medicinal value. We've had experience of working with suppositories, topically, ingesting it, and seen amazing outcomes, all the way down to just helping people with the quality of life, which we've had many people talk about in the transitioning from hospice or just healthcare in general. The stories go on wide. I'm just one here talking about my mother's example and my ability to be able to help people here in the state locally. I'm currently not working here locally. I'm having to travel abroad as well as to the US to continue to pursue my passion in working in cannabis, given our current environment. I grew up here and I call Hawaii my home. And I want so badly to be able to continue to pursue this passion, being able to help others through medical cannabis. So I hope that what I've shared today not only gives you examples of how medical cannabis can be used, but also how we need to educate and empower our communities. The time is now. I cannot overemphasize this. The changes and the thought process that the state and everyone involved in this needs to sit down and actually take the time to really go through this program and make sure that it is not a failure like we've currently seen with lack of participation all the way down to our licenses being sold to outside entities. And for that, guys, I'm forever grateful for being able to share with you today. And if you have any questions, you can find my information or come up to me after. But again, very blessed to be here with you today and sharing my experience with medical cannabis. Thank you.
Awesome, Chad. Thank you so much for your speech and putting your personal information out there. It was really eye-opening to see the things that you've done with your mother. It's amazing work you've done, and hopefully we can continue to see your work live on. Hopefully even bring you back to the islands, right? Next up we have Clay. Clay is also Brogaru Hawaii and also part of Everyone Knows You're High, a local podcast. His topic is From the Aina, For the People, by the Farmer. Clay was born and raised in Hawaii as Kanaka. A farmer for 13 years, incorporating farming practices that are sustainable and beneficial to the longevity of Hawaii and the community. He has grown a variety of native foods and also has experience with livestock like ducks, goats, and chickens. Clay has helped farmers from planting their garden to harvest and even troubleshooting. He recently started a custom craft soil line called Sacred Land Soil. Please welcome Clay.
I don't think we need this one either.
Yeah, just because it goes into the speaker.
We good?
That means you couldn't hear me.
I heard you.
Best.
Okay, here we go. How's everybody? Aloha mai kako. My name is Kale Kana'ana. Local Kanaka here on the islands. Born and raised here from, generations. yeah, so, thank you guys all for speaking, and you guys touched on every aspect of cannabis so far that's our concerns with the community, all the way from patient care to veterans affairs to, medical, medical benefits that this plant has to offer, which we kind of all know over the years, and we kind of advocate for it. So a little bit about myself. Again, born and raised here on Oahu. I own a local horticulture store called the Grow Gurus Grow Supply. Basically, I just educate people on how to do proper practices to sustain our island and our home, because my home means a lot to me, and I just want to put out the bar where we help everybody cultivate safe food and medicine, and do it with the sustainability in mind, where we can do this over generations without having any impact to us. So in 2016, I hurt my back working. It was pretty bad. It was discs that I ruptured. So my doctor, naturally, like you guys said, first line of defense is opioids. Put me on opioids to make me feel comfortable. But I mean, I was a super healthy, super active guy, got hurt. I couldn't do what I wanted to do. I couldn't handle the pain, and putting my life in a deficit stirred up some depression. And that was one of the hardest things, being a person, being a functioning member of society, is dealing with depression as well as your pain. So it's a lot to deal with on a daily basis. So with cannabis, it helped me alleviate the pain, but not only that, it helped me mitigate my depression, which, in return, it helped me become a better father, a better provider, and a better human being, and it helped me reach my full potential as a human being. So that's kind of what cannabis has done for me, and I feel that I need to return the favor to the plant. And my discussion today is basically focusing on the plant itself and our practices in growing the plant safely, and the standards we should hold our plant to, for ourselves as cultivators. So while I've been touching this plant, I've been helping people out with oils. You guys mentioned Rick Simpson oils. I have 4 separate patients going into remission from cancer. That's under my belt. 1 patient used conventional medical practices along with the Rick Simpson oil I provided, but 3 others just used the Rick Simpson oil, and they went into remission. So that is a notch under my belt that gives you the motivation to keep on trying and keep on pushing forward for this plant. So yeah, I'm a father. I have I have my priorities in life, and cannabis is one of those prime priorities that I put, because over the years, generationally, this is going to be something I'm going to leave behind, that I'm going to teach my kids how to heal other people by doing so in the Pono way possible. So in Hawaii, we also said la'au lapa'au is the healing practices that use native plants, herbs, foods to treat illnesses and ailments. Like medicine, our food should be held at the same standard. Our food is mostly imported, which raises the question, is it safe? Is it truly, really safe? As the practices that these farmers done overseas, is it safe for our consumption? Are they held to the same regulations as all of us are here locally? No, it's not how. So, the only regulations that should be in place for cannabis, in my opinion as a farmer, is safety regulations. Does your plants have carcinogens in it? Did you farm it safely? Is there heavy metals? Is there harmful yeast and molds? A lot of our testing for cannabis does that, but for our food, we don't do that for our food at all. So I think we should have that both on the same keel. When we're consuming food, we should be thinking about the same things as food as we are when we consume our medicine. Safety is safety across the board. So as an organic farmer, I pride myself on having not only safe produce, but safe medicine. And also, what I also do to take a step further is I research the practices of farming that's going to help remediate what conventional agriculture has done over the past. So years and years and years, we've been just spraying our soil. We've been putting all these metals in the hope of efficiency and increasing our profitability on the crops that we're producing. But I think we need to take a step back, and we need to focus on, are we doing this thing safe for the longevity of Hawaii? Because this is my home, and my home needs to be my home forever, for my kids, on and on. So it's my responsibility to take care of our aina, and our aina is the dirt we stand on. So are we farming this dirt? Are we farming this soil in a Pono way possible? Are we farming it to where it's not going to hurt our keiki when they're older? You know, are we gonna keep this way of life and keep Hawaii in the future? And that's where me as a farmer, I can put my foot down and be like, yeah, this is what I'm gonna do to perpetuate our culture and to keep everything going on in the future. Hawaii is such a unique, beautiful place, unlike anywhere in the world. And I say that, you know, I went to school in the mainland, I traveled all over, and I always come back home thinking I'm the luckiest dude alive because of the home I'm at right now. So at any means necessary, I'll die for this place, and I'll teach people how to act properly when being a farmer, especially being a farmer, you know, what you're farming. You know, I want you guys to take that seriously because you affect. We're like a medical professional, if you think about it, from the grassroots level. The doctors, yeah, they're committed to try and helping your lives and you know, keeping you healthy. But your farmers, man, they handle your food, they handle your medicine, they handle everything from everything everyone was talking about. We're the grassroots. We start everything. So with poor practices of the farmer, guess what? Your medicine's not going to be good. Your food's not going to be good. So setting the bar and proper farming practices is paramount to Hawaii, I think, to cannabis in Hawaii, because, you know, there's a lot of, it's vague out there. You know, people, their quality and what they set as quality is based off of very superficial means. And quality should be from soil to oil. Everything in between should be handled with quality. So with research and medical properties that come with cannabis, we all know the entourage effect is something that we all pride ourselves on, right? The terpenes associated with the cannabis, the cannabinoids, and them working in conjunction gives it its full therapeutical benefits for cannabis. There's a lot of things that influence your terpene production and your cannabinoid production. And a lot of it, I'm a firm believer, where we live in Hawaii, there's no other place in the world that can farm the proper terpenes, the proper cannabinoids. So Hawaii's cannabis is pretty unique in the research of cannabis in general, because we're throwing out terpenes and cannabinoids that probably the rest of the continental United States aren't seeing because of our geographic location, our volcanic soil, right? Our temperature, just our climate in general gives cannabis this unique property right now here on this islands. So we need to harness cannabis in Hawaii as more of a special thing than just conventional cannabis globally, right? We live in a very special place, and I think we need to open up the doors to do a little bit more particular research on what this plant can offer grown here in Hawaii. Yeah, so allowing these traits to show, genetic traits are always influenced by, you know, the climate that you're in, of course, the parents that inherit these traits, but expression of the traits will happen when farmed correctly. So farming your medicine and your food correctly will give you the best benefit in the end for that plant. I hate to talk about this, but economics is another thing, right? Cannabis provides medicine that's a means to preserve small businesses in Hawaii. During COVID, we've seen small businesses just shut down just because of the lack of regulation and you know, lack of foresight to see what's about to happen. So self-sustainability in Hawaii is our identity. It's something that, you know, we try to take care of ourselves without having to rely on outside entities to keep us going, you know. With cannabis, that offers us a contingency to tourism, which tourism is pretty much our main focus of income here in Hawaii. Exportation, our craft, our Hawaiian identity for growing these medicines or these foods that you can't see anywhere else on the planet, that should allow us to export. That should allow us to have the need for whatever we're doing for the rest of the United States, rest of the world. So we should embrace that, and we should really focus on what we have to offer the world here in Hawaii and how to preserve Hawaii as our home and as a people, you know. It's not only being about Kanaka, it's the Hawaiian way of life. It's the reflection us Kanaka gives to everyone else who comes to visit or who comes to move over. It's our local aloha that we try to give to everybody. So let's show aloha in our food and our medicine and perpetuate that mentality throughout the entire planet. So if you guys can take anything out of this to help the local farmers, you know, if you can help us out with tax incentives, you know, grants, any kind of assistance that allows us to aloha aina, that's one step forward into perpetuating our culture for future generations to keep on doing what we're doing. You know? So retaining our local community is paramount, and able to lead with compassion and sustainability, I think that's what Hawaii is all about. So thank you guys so much. Aloha.
Thank you, Kale, for that insight from a farmer's perspective. Hawaii is small business, and we do have a lot of local farmers that need to have their voice reached out to so everyone else can hear. So we really appreciate that outlook and that perspective. So now that we're done with the speaking session, I know we have a little bit time left, and thank you guys for powering through it. We really appreciate everyone today. The last about 15 minutes, we're going to bring up our speakers to do a short panel. So we're just going to kind of bring the chairs up to configure it so we can let them sit, and then we're going to have a few questions so that our panelists can kind of speak on something. So, you know, yeah, let's bring our speakers up, and we'll just set up the chairs right in front of here. Squeeze it in. All right, good. JT, please. Squeeze in, guys. Squeeze in. Squeeze in. Shift over. See. Test, test. Test, test. Okay, so one of the first questions that we had that came in is, what is the difference between FDA-approved cannabis-based pharmaceutical drugs and plant-based cannabis nutraceuticals or supplements manufactured and sold in state-licensed medical dispensaries? Henry, I think you want to speak on that.
I'll be happy. So you haven't heard from me. I haven't talked here. So just let me introduce myself. I'm at the Queens Medical Center. I'm a director of research. I hold one of the only research licenses from the DEA here in Hawaii. And I am funded through the NIH to study the cellular and molecular mechanisms of plant-based ingredients in the cannabis plant. So we are very much interested in putting a research aspect to the plant, because any plant that you grow will be a different type of medicine, because every plant has a different composition of molecules, and some of the molecules are really beneficial, others actually may counteract the actions of a beneficial molecule. So what we are trying to do is we're trying to find out what are the molecules that are really beneficial for a particular type of disease. And remember, even among patients, every person here in this room will respond differently, not only to a single molecule, you know, a pharmaceutical molecule. So the FDA has a number of approved drugs, but not all of us will respond to that particular drug, even though it only has one very defined ingredient in the same way. And this is even more complicated if each one of us take the same plant. And then what happens when we all use different plants? Because when you're going to a dispensary, right, every plant extract that you get is a very unique medicine, and you are only one person. So everybody is a clinical trial of n = 1. This is really complicated, and this is why we're trying to put, the research aspect into it and trying to define what are the mechanisms. Obviously, you have heard about the endocannabinoid system. So in our bodies, we do have certain types of receptors that respond to molecules that our body generates. These are anandamides and fatty acids and things that our body itself uses to stimulate what we call cannabinoid receptors type 1 and type 2. The type 1 receptor is the one that is primarily located in our brains. And the type 2 is the one that is mostly distributed throughout our body, including the immune system. All right, so when we are looking at the complexity, we really need to find out which molecules do we want to actually use from the plant. And do we want to use one? Do we want to use two or three? And that is really the primary question. And the FDA will not easily allow you to make a combination of molecules because of the complexity of the interactions of these molecules, right? So when we're looking at FDA-approved drugs, we have dronabinol. You have already heard about that. That is a THC, a pure THC. We have the pure CBD, which is Epidiolex, which has recently been approved by the FDA. And then we have Sativex, which is actually a mixture of THC and CBD at 50-50%. Now, we have FDA-approved drugs that we can put into people with defined concentrations of these particular cannabinoids, right? Have you heard about these molecules being wildly successful? No. Why is that? And the reason for that is because THC and CBD are the molecules that are just present in huge amounts in the plant. I mean, you've been talking about RSO, right? That's 60 to 90% THC. If you want to really understand what these molecules are doing for you, you need to test all of them. And you need to test even the ones that are present in very small quantities. And this is why some of you or patients are self-medicating with huge amounts of, I heard 1 gram a day, right? And even Epidiolex, it's given to kids at 20 to 30 milligrams per kilogram. That is a lot of compound. And the reason for that is actually something that we found out recently. These molecules are actually bound in the plasma of the blood. So they're bound to proteins that we transport in our bloodstream called albumins. And this is why you have very, very little free cannabinoid available to you. And this is why you need these high doses. But whenever you go to high doses, you are also increasing side effects. So I'm talking too long. But what I would like to stress is that we are at the beginning of understanding a few of the effects of these cannabinoids and also of minor cannabinoids. So I can tell you, for example, something that we haven't even published yet, but we have found a molecule that is a very, very rare cannabinoid. You can not even extract it from the typical plant in large quantities, so this is why we're synthesizing it, or a collaborator of us is synthesizing it. We're putting it into cellular systems that we are studying in order to see whether it will impact, for example, cell growth and proliferation. So when you have cancer, your tumor grows, right? And that sucks because that's going to kill you in the end. So if you can stop that growth, that would be wonderful. But for that, you need to find the molecule that will do that. And this molecule will then have to be delivered at a concentration that is appropriate in well-defined quantities, preferably in a pharmaceutical composition. Sometimes you have multiple molecules that do something. So then you can reduce the concentration of both of them and still get a very nice effect and reduce the side effects of a large quantity of each one of them. And so let me just add one thing for Epidiolex, which you may not have heard yet, and which is why CBD may actually be good and bad for you. And you don't really know whether it's good or bad for you. So CBD Epidiolex has been approved by the FDA, presently only for the treatment of child epilepsies. And the reason for that is that in clinical trials, these people, or the kids, got CBD at a certain concentration, relatively high concentrations, but because these kids have epilepsies, you cannot just, abandon their normal drug treatment, right? So Epidiolex is given on top of their medicine. Okay, here's the problem with CBD. CBD has a strong side effect in that it inhibits certain enzymes in our liver. They're called cytochrome P450. That's a molecule that actually breaks down what we ingest in medicines. If you inhibit this enzyme in the liver, your normal drug will go up. It will go really high. And this is why CBD actually was found to be very effective, because it essentially increased the dose of the other medication that these kids got because it wasn't broken down. And so it's a double-edged sword, right? So if you, typically you still, like if you're treating your mom probably got other drugs, right? Or if you treated her with she wasn't receiving any other drugs?
No.
Right, but in many cases, like for example in breast cancer, there are molecules that are given to you as a chemotherapeutic that will increase in dosage too. So in that case, you may actually increase the dosage of another molecule. But the important thing is there are important and very effective molecules in the plant. We just need to identify them and hopefully create something that we can give every patient in a defined manner, rather than everybody going into the dispensary and trying out every little, extract to see which one helps that patient. So, yeah, so that's the difference between FDA-approved molecules and the plant and the extract. That's
Awesome. We appreciate the insight.
Can I ask a hypothetical question? Why mess with the plant? And see, this is the thing, because our body is made to process natural things, just like nicotine. Nicotine has a bad reputation, but our body has millions of receptors for nicotine, because nicotine in its pure form, out of tobacco, not what the tobacco industry had done to it. It's a medicine to our body in the right doses. And see, I think sometimes through research and science, we take a natural product and turn it into a chemical that's more harmful to our body than it is good. And see, our body is unique where it can break down what it needs, and what it does not need, it discharges. So my issue with a lot of things, because I believe that the pharmaceutical industry is actually doing more harm to our body than it is good, because you take 90% of the medicine that we take is killing our second brain, which is our gut bacteria. Cannabis does not affect the gut like all the medicine. You take cannabis, it controls depression. But however, depression drugs that we take from the pharmaceutical industry kills our gut bacteria, that increases the hopelessness, I want to commit suicide, because it's killing the bacteria that releases enzymes and the right proteins in our body to help soothe our minds. And my thing is, why mess with the plant? Because the plant in the natural state is perfect for what we need. And all you got, and I agree with you as a grower, the earth provides everything to that leaf that our body needs. So we don't need to do that. And that's why I have an issue with a lot of things that when it comes to let the plant by itself, because I used to be anti-cannabis.
Sorry, sir, I don't want to stop you, but we really don't have too much time. We're going to have some time after the panel's done that you can, talk amongst yourselves and have some quality time with each other. But I have a couple more questions that got sent in. So the next question is, real quick, can someone explain what hash heads trichome size has to do with medicine?
Hash head size in terms of medicine? Gland head size, yeah. So micron so that's basically what I specialize in, is collection of those trichome heads. What is transpiring in that trichome head is the development of cannabinoids and those terpenes. So when you have a larger gland, yes, there are lipids and fats associated in that gland, but majority of that is cannabinoids and terpenes. So the larger gland you have is usually more mature, more cannabinoid prevalent and terpene rich, as opposed to an earlier, smaller developed. And this can be either in the process of the plant or in the location of the plant. So you can have larger trichomes with more light exposure, as opposed to lower parts of the plant, which have smaller trichomes and smaller development. But basically, the larger the trichome, the more potential it has for richer cannabinoids and terpenes.
Awesome, appreciate that. The next question here is, how do you bring out the most or the best expressions in the plant?
Basically, the plant has its genetic potential. Giving it what it needs, when it needs, you express the plant's full potential genetically, right? So like I was saying, the sun intensity, where we're located, the soil and how we take care of it. Yeah, so that is how you express the plant fully in its best form, is giving it a buffet and not just like, the Matrix, when you're just being fed what you want to be fed. Yeah, just letting the plant do what it needs to do, and it's going to be the happiest it needs to be.
Awesome, thank you.
Yes, go for it.
I just want to mention a Google project where they're really isolating biomolecular bacterium. They're basically, we're way ahead of where we are scientifically in our thinking. So in other words, we're coming up with these ideas, like we want to know what the soil microbiology is to cause these genetic expressions, along with environmental pressures. But Google is solving this with a quantum computer as we speak, and we're going to have access to it. So right now we know about 0.5% of what's in our soil, right? We have some really brilliant research scientists that have identified 5, 7 microbes, right? And they're working with those microbes because they have a synergistic effect with cannabis. But in the very near future, we're going to have the database is already created, and we're going to have an entire database to be able to look up these biomolecular structures and isolate those in our soil. So,
Awesome, thank you for that. Next question is, how does cannabis help with mental health and, I guess, veterans and suicide?
Well, as a veteran myself and as working as a medical assistant, a lot of the patients that I've worked with are veterans, and unfortunately, suicide affects our community quite drastically. Very recently, someone very close to me, a family member who was an Army veteran, actually himself passed away or succumbed to veteran suicide because of his symptoms from PTSD a couple of days ago. A lot of times, a lot of the veterans, the people who have deployed, and not just military veterans, but DOD as a whole, police officers, firefighters, the EMS, Coast Guard, things, they, even dealing with some homeless sometimes, they go through things, and a lot of times there's not many people who step up to become military. Only 1, maybe 2% tops of our entire population is military. So a lot of times they feel like they don't have anybody to vent to or to share their experience with because minimal people have experienced it. And some other times from what I've been seeing, veterans or patients, there is that shame of stigma that comes with using medication, being called a drug user, drug taker, the stigma between having a mental issue, a mental health issue, and being classified as something other than possibly normal, or, so and that weighs on people, regardless of how physically strong they are, emotionally, mentally, these things are heavy to us. And so it's no surprise that people who work in these traumatic industries succumb. But again, myself as a medical assistant and as a veteran, I too kind of have a similar question, because there's so many of us who work in this industry. We all work together day to day. We see each other, we greet each other on social media, but in person and face to face, a lot of us, we do need that communication and that camaraderie that we have or some of us no longer receive from being active duty. And that does get depressing sometimes, or disheartening. That might get discouraging to some people who are used to having a support team, who now maybe only have 2 or 3 people that they talk to day to day. So, the PTSD, the depression, suicide, anxiety, bipolarism, a lot of these things, they affect us, not just veterans and things, but people in society as a whole. And I think that the conversation around that we should expand on that and have more of these conversations, so more people don't feel so alone and secluded, and that they know that there are people who truly not only care, but are going through it too. And maybe they could learn or benefit from you sharing your story. There's other
Can I
veterans.
ask you a question?
Absolutely.
Because you may be able to answer that for me. So veterans, when they choose which plant or which extracts or which ingestion method they use, is there good data to suggest that are they shooting for the highest THC levels? Are they shooting for CBD for the combination? Or what is because remember, we have psychoactive cannabinoids and we have other cannabinoids that are not psychoactive. Even though, for example, CBD is not psychoactive, right? But it will modulate how THC works because it's a downer, right? So how do veterans choose the plan that helps?
I'm going to pass this off to someone else, but before, I would just like to share that a lot of the veterans that I've seen at Ala Park, Chinatown, unfortunately, because there's such a lack of education and community outreach related to not only medical cannabis, but complementary and alternative medicine as a whole. If it's not pharmaceutical or chemical, it probably doesn't get spoken on, versus Ayurvedic or other things we see in Hawaii, because we're so we have access to the international market, Japan, China, Korea, things like that. What I have seen working with the dispensaries are a lot of people are undereducated in the bioavailability of THC, endocannabinoids and THC, things like that. So a lot of times, I myself have seen people tend to go for the higher concentrations, thinking that that's going to help, but really a lot of times, can only speak for myself, higher concentrations of THC don't necessarily help me specifically with concentration. Low dosage medication for myself, pretty good. But too much, it raises the anxiety and it's difficult.
You're talking about THC, right?
Myself and THC, yes. So it's different, different for myself, and that's what I see with patients. But I'm going to pass this off to others.
Let me answer that question by asking another question. Do you guys recognize the entourage effect in Queens Medical Center?
Yes, we have actually published on that.
Okay, so I think that this is based on a trial error, based on the consumer when they walk in. Historically, they'll be like, hey, that strain has worked for me. That cultivar has worked for me. So they're more inclined to return to that particular genetics. Of course, there's a lot of variables that come accompany with that, with how they grew it, how they cured it, the type of mind frame you're coming in. But also, I think that the main thing that we got to take away from this is recreation is therapy. If you feel good, you get put into a less depressive state, You know, I think it's not so much T's and I's and what we can log in. This plant has been historically beneficial to us before research was done. So I think the gentleman here is talking about like isolating. It could be a dangerous thing. I mean, we see that in extracts and stuff, but what he's trying to say is leave it alone. Like, let the plant in its entirety help us as a human race rather than trying to see, well, this molecule is beneficial to us, you know? Yes.
Right. But what you also need to realize is that the FDA will never approve something like that, right? So the FDA is very, very scientific about it, and you need to know exactly what's in there. Because if you don't know that, you do not know how a person will react to it. And I can give you an example. So I know a person who is taking a certain strain that really has helped her to sleep well, okay? So she gets that, and then half a year later, she gets the same drug. Supposedly the same. It's not the same. All of a sudden it doesn't work anymore, even though the major composition is really within, you know, very, very small variations of the original composition. And this is the problem with plants. You can have the same seeds planted in different soils, and they will give you a different plant.
Yeah, there's phenotypes and genotypes, right, that come along with these plants. But when we do agricultural use, we've done tissue cultures, where we can replicate the exact makeup of that plant and cultivate that plant specifically in the same circumstances that we would. You know, so we're better equipped to replicate our medicine now than we were than just throwing the seeds into the ground.
I think one thing that brings synergy to this question and to this discussion is that effective dosage therapy, you know, microdosing, things like that should be put in the forefront, because here on one side we have the scientific analysis and then we have the historical information. I really think that we need to bring both together. There's going to be certain people going to go to the FDA and ask for a drug or be prescribed a drug to their condition. Others are out in the land. They're along the line. They're growing things they know can help them and help their grandmother. You know what I mean? So I think it's just a variation of what your choice is. But I definitely think dosage therapy from a physician standpoint, clinician standpoint, needs to be incorporated. And like I said before, the patient follow-up visit should be having these conversations with the physicians and with physicians that have the information that you're producing. I think both sides are very important, because we have to have a scientific analysis for people to get off our back and start criminalizing this. You know what I mean? So I can say all the time that this particular strain helps me, I know it does. But like I said, when I go to my doctor, it's a confrontation. That confrontation puts you in a criminal aspect. I'll pass off to Dr. Bott. I think Dr. Bott.
No, and thanks, Dr. Penner, that input. For me, you know, I share a little bit on both sides, because, you know, obviously the scientific, the FDA, as we say back home, son como mierdas, if you know Spanish, you know what that is, but they'll look at it as, I want a molecular breakdown. I want a cytokinetic molecular breakdown to know how the receptivity and how it relates to a certain disease and pathology. Okay. Sorry. So, I'm sorry. So, and that's kind of the way it is, good, bad, or ugly. But here's the thing too, I'd like to kind of illuminate a little bit and shed some light. And this is kind of the beauty of just the fact that what's God given us in this world is plants. And the fact of the matter, when Colorado passed and the sativa and some of the other hybridized versions, you know, and I was talking to some of these guys from a medical clinical standpoint, just to get ideas, you know, and just so you know, I think I've shared with you, I took advantage with one medical team, and so I don't do anything with patients I don't do to myself. So if it's marijuana, when I was sick, I'm going to tell you, gummies help me sleep at night. I'm going to tell you, if it wasn't for them, you know, I'd be hurting. And that's when, you know, crawling to the bathroom when I couldn't control myself, and just that's my personal experience. But aside from that, we got into some talks about, and I'm not an expert, topography and subterranean, nutrient dense, Hawaii special, volcanic activity. I know for a fact, because I've seen it, I put it to a test at one of my clinics in Florida when we wanted to see basically, it was actually from Central America, volcano enriched nutrient dirt, soil. And we tested with 3 different plants, you know, and one was just a flower. And it was just, the expedient growth process was just amazing. So the point is, to that note, if you're extracting and you're looking at different concentrations, because I've talked to vets, that's the conundrum. It's like you can't specify, say, hey, if I'm growing it in a mile high in Colorado, as opposed to, I won't even say Florida because we're at sea level, but if you say something closer to that, or even something even higher, you know, I can talk about different coffee strains. We talk about, not just because I'm Colombian, but how they're less likely, and you heard about the Andes, there's a stronger viability to live in harsh conditions. So a lot of those plants that are extracted, they think, and we've seen in certain studies that in extractions and combination, even with pharmaceuticals, that's a better quality. So I think if we can establish, like if we do a study here in Hawaii, why don't we do it? We say it's homegrown. We say we're using that here, so there's not any concern or question. And I think from an economic standpoint, it can actually improve, and especially with a lot of things going on in Hawaii since I've been here. And I love the culture. You know, what I've seen is very similar to my Spanish upbringing. But I think that could be an added thing. But I think part of the conundrum is what you're providing me and what I'm doing. We at West Coast, East Coast, Nepal, or, you know, you really don't know because of the nutrient value. And you can't say by virtue, it's like, okay, your THC, what is it, beyond 0.03, if that's a differentiator? And if you have a set number, it's going to be different in different parts of the U.S., let alone around the country. So I think if we establish that, that'll be key, especially on the scientific FDA side.
Well, we have difficulty in actually saying and then if you grow it higher, you have higher UV. UV will change the composition of cannabinoids as well. So one cannot just say, okay, so this is a plant and we can easily reproduce this plant everywhere. And this is what the FDA will ask you to do. Because if you give each patient a different plant, a different composition, a different extract, you will have a hard time creating a reliable output.
And I agree, that's part of the conundrum.
That's a natural process because in a different climate, I'm going to be different. When I lived in Iceland, I was different. So, and that's a natural order of how things are in the scientific world.
I'm going to jump in here real quick. We're looking at an analogy using something that we know on a singular matter. There is non-decarboxylated, there's carboxylated, non-decarboxylated, decarb matter, there's terpenes, and how that interaction of all different is exactly why the FDA or whoever body is changing it needs to state and see those differences, as opposed to a synthetic synthesized single cannabinoid. It's the interaction with your body with those other. It's not singular. We've seen that in the use of these synthetic drugs and their lack of efficiency.
And remember, the carboxylated and decarboxylated molecules. If you take the cannabis plant itself does not have a single molecule of ethyl-THC. There is no ethyl-THC. It's all THCA, the carboxy version. It's completely non-psychoactive. Right? So this is why you have to heat it. This is why you have to smoke it. This is why you have to make it in the ground. Bake it. Make it hot so that it decarboxylates in order to make it psychoactive. So the plant itself is completely neutral. It doesn't have any psychoactive molecule. You have to heat it before you test it.
You have to produce it synthetic.
Well, you can synthesize each one of them, right? So you can either isolate, you can isolate, and you can buy isolates in bulk.
Look, I think our conversation is based on definitely the therapeutic value of cannabis, but we're looking at what insurance company reimburse. That's why the question of FDA we should put this together. We should form a group to where this is what's going on in Hawaii. But when it comes to insurance, we should point our questions towards the people who are not insuring us on the medical need. You know what I mean? Versus us having a conversation about what's not. We can study science all day long. We have tools now, and we have a breakdown. Yeah, but we need to devote our time towards saying, how can we get insurance?
All right, there's a couple more questions before we kind of wrap this up, and we're maybe able to take one from the audience because some people sent in their questions ahead of time. So give me 1 second. This last question that we had sent in was, how does cannabis help with, or what's the major breakthrough in cannabis and psychology? That was one of the last questions, and then we can maybe take 1 or 2 from the audience.
What's the major breakthrough?
I don't think we can talk about a breakthrough. As you may well know, cannabis is discussed very controversially. So if you look at all of the meta-studies are where people analyze a lot of published work. And the major conclusion is that most people will come to the conclusion that there's not enough scientific evidence to recommend cannabis as a remedy for any type of disease, be it psychological or disease. There's no concrete evidence that it will help cure cancer. There's no concrete evidence that it will reduce pain in a manner that you can actually quantify rather than psychologically change the perception of pain. But that is also true for other pain medications. It's not just related to cannabis. So psychologically, I don't think that